Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. And today I have a very special guest, Dr. Bill Campbell. He is back for the third time. In case you aren't familiar with him, he is a professor of exercise science and the director of the Performance and Physique Enhancement Laboratory at the University of South Florida. His research is focused on improving exercise performance and enhancing physique through the synergism of resistance exercise, nutrition, and dietary supplements. And what I like specifically about his research too is it's physique oriented. I think that's super helpful for people and kind of my audience as well. So Dr. Campbell, thank you for coming on again, and we're happy to have you.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to talk about physique enhancement.
Yeah, that's what we nerd out on here. So I know for you, are you guys just kind of a little update on you? Are you back in school? Did the semester start? What's that looking like for you?
Yeah, so actually 10 minutes ago, I was teaching my class, my first class of the semester. So it's an undergraduate sports nutrition class. So got done with that, came up, logged in, and here we are. So day one of the teaching semester. Now I've been back for a while, getting ready for research for the semester.
Cool. So what does a typical like semester look like for you? Is it how many classes do you typically teach, and then like and is there like just a couple like research projects that you do per semester, or is it just kind of random there with that?
A typical semester will be I teach two classes, an undergraduate class and a master's level class. And then the rest of my time is either program administration, service to the university or the profession. And then obviously the bulk of my time is research. And that can be anywhere from 1 to 3 studies at a time, depending on, I will never do 3 large studies because that I feel like the quality goes down, but depending on the year, probably typically 2 studies, 1 large one, 1 smaller one.
And is that per semester, or are you talking throughout the entire year?
That would be throughout the year. So, it's funny when, like, if I thought of a study today, like, hey, let's do this study, it's at least 3 months, 4 months before you can even start the study because of all of their approvals and paperwork. And then it's about a year from the thought of it till it's done because of the time it takes to get your team together, train your team, get the budget set, train your staff, get the subjects recruited. And then, if it's a training study, that's 10 weeks, you have to add all that in. So it's a very, very project-based career that is nothing quick about it.
Yeah, definitely patience. And yeah, I know I say this every time, but the more and more I learn about research, the more I'm just like, man, I mean, there's just so much that goes into it, and it's not an easy thing. So definitely thankful for people like you that do, put the time and effort into it, because I mean, it really is a challenge. And like you said, there's so many things that go into it. What does for you, are you just, when you're kind of coming up with new research ideas, are you just kind of looking at things that you're interested in? I know you've done like diet break studies in the past. Is that kind of where you keep your mind at, or do you also just kind of look at other like things that are going on in the industry too that just kind of spark your curiosity there with that, in terms of like what you want to do for research?
Yeah, for the most part, we study what I want to study. There are times when my research team, which are my students and they're volunteers, I mean, once in a while I have a budget to pay them. There has been instances where they get to choose the direction of what we go, but the area where you have to be careful is if these projects take a year or longer, students come and go.
Yep.
So you have to be careful about, hey, let's do this. And then you have a new team coming in that had nothing to do with that. So I would say for the last few years, it's pretty much been me giving some options to our team. And then we collectively decide, hey, let's do this, trying to complete them within a year so that my students can stay here. And and it's always, again, if my passion is physique enhancement, and always an element of resistance exercise, some type of diet or protein intake, that's kind of like my wheelhouse.
Yeah. And I think you kind of mentioned this throughout, like you don't ever really focus on more like bodybuilders. It's the people you're typically focused on when it comes to your research, or just kind of like Gen Pop, but people that are just focused on like improving their physique, but they're not necessarily looking for like bodybuilding or things like that. Or do you also do some research in like bodybuilders and people with more like extreme physique aspirations?
So we do research on bodybuilders. Now, what you'll never see, or what you will rarely see, is an actual study in bodybuilders. Because if you know bodybuilders, they're not going to let you change their training. They're not going to let you change, because again, they're going to be in one of two groups. One of those two groups is probably going to be a non-optimal group. So it's very difficult to get, 20 bodybuilders to say, yeah, I'll train 3 days per week when they want to train 5. Yeah, I'll take the low protein group. So I would say the research we do in bodybuilders is usually case study focused or case series study, where we'll take a handful of them and then just monitor them. I would say that the right prism from which we do research is it's always bodybuilding inspired. And I would even back up. I would say the research that I do is bodybuilding coach or physique coach, online coach inspired. I like to answer the questions that coaches deal with day to day. So that's driven my lab for the last few years. So that's really, I'm looking at it. Okay, how would what do coaches need to know to help clients, whether they be bodybuilders, but more likely lifestyle bodybuilders who want to look good, or when I say look good, for many people, that's having more muscle mass and a lower than average amount of body fat, but maybe never step on stage. So for those coaches that work with those types of clients, again, I think you would call them Gen Pop clients, but they are serious clients. They're fitness enthusiasts. They're serious about their training, serious about their nutrition. I mean, that's how I would describe myself. That's what's driving my research questions. And I think I'm hoping that my legacy is a sense I've helped the leaders in the space serve their clients better.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Like you said, it is hard it would be tough to get bodybuilders to change the way they go about things. I feel like they're very hard-headed in what they do, and trying to tell them to go low protein, just you're not, no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to get them to buy into that. So like you said, more case studies and basically things that they're already doing. So cool. So I know you had a couple things that came out recently. Body by Science, that's a new research review that you have out. Do you maybe want to, I know that's one thing that you had been working on for some time, and I think the last time I had you on, you kind of alluded that you were going to potentially do that. So for anyone that isn't aware of it, do you maybe want to go over what it is real quick and kind of what your, your goal is with Body by Science?
Yeah, I would love to. And thank you for taking time and for just asking me to talk about it. So Body by Science is categorized as a research review, and there's a few great research reviews in our space, and this would be a new one with a little bit more of a different approach to it. So the thing that the people that I serve the most are evidence-based fitness professionals, or people who, they might not be a fitness professional, but they want the science to guide their training and their exercise. And as we know, reading research, one, is difficult, it's boring, and it's very time consuming. So my new product called Body by Science, it's a research review where I summarize the most relevant and recent studies that are solely focused on building muscle and losing body fat. So I like to think that I'm saving people hours and hours of time so they don't have to read the studies. And again, reading studies is not easy. And even if it were easy, it takes a long time that a lot of people don't have. So I'm bringing the best science, and I'm breaking it down in a way that I hope and believe that it's very understandable. So you don't have to have a science degree. You don't have to be a savant in reading research. And again, I'm not doing my job if I don't make you understand, here's what the researchers did, here was the results, and now here's how we apply it. So again, very focused on muscle building, fat loss. Then I think the unique aspect that I do is I'm bringing in world-class experts and coaches, dietitians, scientists, and they are helping to apply the research that I'm summarizing, because I'm not a coach. I'm a scientist. So I break it down, hopefully in a way that's easy to read. And then I'm saying, okay, expert X and expert Y, how would you apply these research findings in your life or to your clients? And what that does is that stimulates a lot of ideas and basically challenges people. Oh, I never thought of doing it like that. Maybe I should consider that in my own training. Or if you are a fitness coach, maybe I should do this with my clients. So I think that's probably the best value is the application aspect of Body by Science.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that is one thing. So, I've read mass in research review, weightology, like James Krieger's, and theirs are all very good and like you said, they're, you know, amazing research reviews. But one thing that's different with yours, I know, is that you also bring in coaches. I know you had like Steve Hall on one of them, Cody McBroom. I think you had Lauren Conlon at one point too. All people that have been on this podcast, right? And they're actually like talking through the study too. And like you said, you're asking them what they would do with their clients. And I think that's is very helpful for people that, you know, that are coaches, or even if you don't have a coach and you want to learn more about this stuff, that can be super helpful because you can learn how to apply it, right? I think like you said, research, I think a lot of people, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of people, like, research is tough because like I love this stuff, but like you said, it's tough to sit and read through an entire study. Not only that, but like you said, also decipher it and figure out if it is even a good study that you can apply, right? Because there's some ways that people do studies that, you know, you might not even be able to apply to normal everyday people or anything like that. And so that's what your goal is here with this. And then also to have coaches come in and also apply what they know and how they would use that information, I think is super helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm, like I said, I'm very fortunate. I've been in the profession a long time, so I have been able to develop relationships with some of these, like you said, like Steve Hall is just, he's a great coach. So why not pick his brain? Why not let him help educate people? Cody McBroom, another one, Lauren Conlon. So, and the other thing that I do, I always have a female perspective in each issue, because there's a lot of, I mean, I'm told by these coaches that a large part of their clientels are female. So I think it makes sense. Let's make sure that there's a female perspective on the application of these research studies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always like, I always want to make sure that every once in a while, you know, it is tougher to find it, but I always want to make sure I'm getting like females on here as well too, because I think it is important to get, you know, their point of view as well. And like you said, a lot of clients I work with are female as well too, right? Like definitely at least 50-50 on that. But again, I think it's cool because you can go through the study and really pick out like what is important and what's not important. Because again, like I said, I think people can get kind of bogged down on like just reading the abstract or whatever that says and not really know how to apply that specific you know, study to what they do. So yeah, that's, I think I think you've had 2 issues out, I believe. Are you going to do like just 2 studies per issue, or what's that going to look like?
Yeah, so every month it's 2 issues where I summarize the studies. And again, it's always going to be either muscle building or fat loss. And then in addition to the 2 studies, I bring in the 2 experts, sometimes 1 expert, depending on what area they're in, but usually 2 experts, and for them to apply the findings of those studies.
Awesome. So 2 studies per month on each issue, right? And just 1 issue a month. And then
Correct. Yep.
Sorry, I had one more question on that I was going to ask you. Hopefully it comes back to me. Oh, and how do you go about, like, are these going to be all new studies? Are they going to be studies that you know, that have been done in the past? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So they are not, some of them are recent studies. Some of them are what I call landmark studies, and some of them are studies that aren't even published yet. Just because I'm in the industry, I have access to some studies that haven't been published yet. So I would say usually they're going to be recent, within the last year. But the 1 issue coming up, I reviewed a study that was published in 2000, so over 20 years ago. And in that same issue, I'm summarizing an article that's not even been published yet. It's been accepted for publication. It actually happens to be my diet break study. So it's a mix. And the studies that I'm pulling from the past are the studies that have changed the trajectory of physique coaching. So again, they are literally landmark studies. Or like I think it was this month. Again, I'm getting them all confused now. Yeah, the one in this month, I did a resistance training volume 1. And if you ever have a talk, or you're in an evidence-based space, that's the study you have to cite. Now, there can be other ones, but if you overlook that study that I summarized in, I think it's the August issue, it's the best study I've ever read. And I think I've read them all, about 30 of them, that manipulated training volume and then had muscle hypertrophy as the outcome. This was the best study that I've read on the topic. So that has to inform your opinion. It doesn't mean that you have to do something a certain way, but that study should inform how you're going to do your practice, how you're going to do your coaching, or how you're going to plan your resistance training workouts.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's awesome. That's not just new stuff, it's also, like you said, the landmark studies in the past too that are, like you said, kind of altered how we think about things. I know. So if you don't mind, what was the? Can you say what the one from 2000 was, or are you going to wait till that issue comes out?
No, we can talk about it. So and I might not have all the details, even though, and actually, I think that's going to be the September issue. So that'll be the one that comes out in September. So the question that we're asking is, what's better for fat loss, exercise or diet? So let me put you on the spot. What do you think if you had to choose one? Do you think that exercise or diet is better for fat loss?
If I had to choose one, which one is better? There's a lot that goes into it, but I think if you had to change one thing, it would be diet.
Okay. And I would agree. That would be the one that I would choose. But I would say, and let me also say, the research, and I make this point in that issue, the science does point diets are better, but there's a huge problem, massive problem with nearly all of that research. Diet's always better. Diet's always better. The reason that diet always is better is because they don't match the energy deficits. So they might put somebody on a 500 calorie deficit on it, from a food restriction, and then they'll have somebody else, don't diet, just exercise, and they're burning 250 calories or 200 calories or 300 calories per day. So it's not an equal energy deficit. So of course the diets are going to come out better with fat loss or weight loss because it's not an equal playing field. So the study that I summarized from 2000 was, once again, the best study ever conducted. The controls that they did, one group did a 700 calorie caloric restricted diet. So they reduced their food intake by 700 calories per day. The other group, they said, don't diet at all. You're going to be on a treadmill for 700 calories every day. And we're going to supervise it. So they literally had them come into a facility and they watched them burn 700 calories on a treadmill. There's your first study, or the best study. There's a handful of other ones that came close, but there's one where you actually can compare equal energy deficits. And in that case, I'm not going to tell you that the exercise was clearly better. Maybe it was. I'll go ahead and say, hey, subscribe. And the cost, at least right now, is $6.99 per month. It's a launch price. So the price will go up. I believe it's going to go to $8.99 in a few weeks. So again, that's the other thing I didn't mention. I'm trying to make it affordable so that every fitness professional can have it, and that cost wouldn't be a barrier to them having it. But whenever you say diet, whenever I say diet, we have to appreciate that research is very biased in favor of the diets. Now, again, as I sit here today, I'm not going to go out and run an extra hour. I'm just going to reduce my calories. But we also have to appreciate that might not be what the evidence suggests.
And again, this is where having somebody like you break this down can be super helpful, right? Because somebody, again, if they didn't have this study, or, for example, they just asked what was better and nobody knew that they weren't in the same amount of deficit, right? Like it was like, hey, the people that are dieting actually are in a larger deficit. So of course it's going to be better, right? So again, having somebody that knows what to look out for and read that, I think is super helpful. So I think that's a great study right there that just kind of shows the importance of having somebody break that down for you. But no, I agree. I think that's a tough question, but like you said, it would be easier to go and just cut back calories rather than have to go run, or whatever it may be. But so long as you're in the same energy deficit, that's the most important there. Cool. So I guess I wanted to get a little bit more update on you. First thing is, are there any new studies coming out that either you're doing or that you think are going to be really interesting within the next little bit that you're aware of?
Yeah, so what my lab's doing, we're finishing a study on a fat loss supplement that's from Legion Athletics. It's their Phoenix fat loss supplement. So we are looking at that just in terms of its ability to max or increase metabolic rate. So we're comparing a caffeinated version, and they also have a non-caffeinated version. And there's other ingredients in there that may help with fat loss, but we're only interested in metabolic rate responses. So that's a study that we're finishing this semester. My research assistant, Corey, he is managing that study. So he's I always like to thank my research assistants. I have another case study in a bikini competitor. So this is a first-time bikini competitor. My other research coordinator, Lexa Roxtella, she is coaching a case study client as she prepares for her first bikini show. So what we're taking there is, there's been other case studies published on the contest prep process. What we're doing is looking at it from a coach-client relationship. So here's what the coach says to do, and then how does the client adhere to this? And if they are adhering, great. If not, why? So we're looking at it from a little bit different, more from the coaching perspective than just, this is how much fat they lost, this is the change in hormones, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm excited about both of those studies that we have coming out. And then I would also say that Lexa and Corey are spearheading a bodybuilding survey study that we just finished recently. So we had Guillermo Escalante, Eric Helms, trying to think who else may have helped with that. So we got out some other expertise in the bodybuilding space, and those are like legitimate experts in that space. And we just asked questions about drug use, cardio habits, resistance training habits, supplements. So, and that'll be a survey-based study. So we just finished the survey aspect of that one, and they are currently working on writing that up.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to those. I think last time we talked in February, I think there was a protein study that you were potentially doing. I'm not sure if that got finished or if there's any update on that one.
Yeah, so that is finished. Right now we're waiting. We have not analyzed we've analyzed some of the data. We have not analyzed all of the data yet. So that earlier, we talked about conducting a study to help coaches. That's exactly what that study was. So what we did in this study was we took non-resistance trained females, so females who aren't currently resistance training, or they had to have a 6 months or less resistance training experience. And we know in resistance trained subjects, even in resistance trained females, if you increase protein, they build additional muscle mass. And in fact, they actually lose a little bit of fat mass as well. But we don't know, does the same thing happen in non-resistance trained females? And one reason why it might not is if they start resistance training, that response may be so robust that anything else might not matter. Just the fact that they're lifting weights could be enough. So what we did, we had 3 groups. We had a control group where we said, lift 3 days per week and do not change your diet at all. Then we had a protein tracking group where we taught them how to track their macros. Everybody had their own nutrition coach. And we also told them, we want you to hit a goal of 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, or 2.2 grams per kg. And we're going to help you do that. We're going to give you supplements before and after your workout. We're going to teach you the high protein foods that you already are eating. So there were 2 of the groups. So again, just increasing protein a lot or not changing anything was the primary question. Now, the aspect that we brought into this to really help coaches was the 3rd group that we had. This is what I'm calling the intuitive eating group. So we told a 3rd group, we want you to do the same workout that the other 2 groups are doing. Again, this is in my Physique lab where we get to watch them lift weights. We supervise everything. And we said, rather than tracking your macros, rather than learning how to work with spreadsheets and all that, what we want you to do is just intuitively increase protein. We don't want you to track anything. We just want you to identify what's a high protein food and try to eat more of it. And specifically, we said, try to double your current protein intake. If you normally have 2 eggs for breakfast, have 4. If you normally have fish once per week, have fish twice per week. If you have chicken salad for lunch, try to get double chicken. So we help them identify through their own food records, what are you already doing naturally? Let's just increase this. And of course, we also gave them supplements before and or after their workouts. And the reason we wanted to do this is because if you are a physique coach and you have a new client, I like this tiny habits philosophy where let's make it easy for a new client. Yeah. Hey, start lifting weights, do squats, do deadlifts, make sure you're doing cardio. Oh, let's track your macros. Make sure you get it becomes overwhelming. So what if we say, just increase protein. Don't worry about anything else with your diet. If you don't have to reduce your calories, you don't even have to increase them. Maybe you'll naturally reduce your carbs or fat. So that was the study that we just completed. And again, we're in the process of analyzing that data. And hopefully that will be done before the end of the year and then published in 2023.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that will be a really cool study. And like you said, that will help out a lot of coaches and just people, like you said, getting into weight training and everything like that to decide, what exactly they all need to work on when they first get into it. So I'm really looking forward to that one. Hopefully by 2023, you said it.
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah. I've got a few studies on my desk that I'm still.
It sounds like it. You're busy as always. And so, but yeah, really looking forward to that one. Awesome. What about on your end? Any update on like your training or nutrition or anything that you are working on currently?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to go on a diet myself, and I'm going to turn that into a case study. So I'm going to document the whole process as I try to lose body fat and put it in a scientific standard approach where I'll publish it. So I'm working with Mike Matthews on this. Do you know?
Yep, Legion.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. So I really like his approach to things. So, and he's actually, again, they funded a study. They've also just donated some money to my lab with absolutely no expectations. They're like, hey, if this can help just further the science of fitness and physique. So I'm very grateful to them. Awesome. So his knowledge is so much. I'm like, hey, Mike, here's what I'm thinking. Let me just get your feedback, because he's worked with a ton of clients. So there's a belief amongst some people that if you eat a high carbohydrate diet, the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity, that you're not going to lose weight. You have to reduce your carbs. So I'm going to diet on a high carbohydrate diet for months and months. And I'm going to try to get it as high as I can. And realistically, that means about 65% of my calories. I tried to do the math and get it to 70%, but then when you figure in fats and protein, I just don't think I can. My protein's already going to be about 1.2 grams per kg as I do this, if I'm going to keep my carbs at 65% of my diet and calories. So I guess as a scientist, will I lose body fat? I'm pretty sure I will, even with very high carbs. I also plan to do a little bit of blood work with some of my high carb meals just to demonstrate, hey, insulin was really spiked here, and I have this meal 3 times per week to really demonstrate, or to demonstrate that it's possible to lose body fat even with high carbs. Now, again, there's other studies that suggest this, but I'm also, I'm a scientist. If I don't lose weight with this, well, then we'll have data to suggest I couldn't lose weight in a high carbohydrate diet. So in a sense, I'm trying to make this a little public. I think this is the first conversation I had about this, but I would like to get people's feedback on the design, draw attention to it, because it is frustrating that there's so many, what's the word I want to look for? There's just so many false dichotomies about dieting. Can't eat high carbs. So, and then I'm thinking maybe what I would do next is maybe reverse it and go low carb, just to demonstrate, hey, I can also lose fat on low carb. Now, again, I'm not committed to that to that yet, but it has crossed my mind. So yeah, we'll do some blood work. My training will be standardized. Obviously my nutrition will be standardized. And protein's going to be lower than it's been in a long time for me. So right now I'm in a maintenance phase where I've adjusted to this. I'm establishing my maintenance calories for the next few weeks just to make sure that I'm in the ballpark. And then, yeah, I'm just going to try to, put it out publicly, get feedback on the design, and then go for it.
Awesome. Yeah. So protein, you said 1.2 kg. So that's about what, 0.6-ish, 0.5, 0.6 grams per pound of body weight.
Yeah, I think that's about right. And again,
I always just do half.
What'd you say?
I always just do like half, basically. That's my like kind of easy, my ghetto way to go about figuring that out. Is I just kind of do half, basically. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, this is 0.55 grams per kg.
Okay.
And again, I that was what I estimated if my maintenance calories were 2,900. And again, over the last, I'm in my second week now. It's right about 2,900, I think, is what it has been. And my weight has been very stable. So looks like I'm right on target here. But
Cool.
I'm really excited about this because again, it'll be another case study, but it'll be a case study on fat loss in a high carbohydrate diet environment.
Yeah. And like you said, just for the audience that doesn't understand, you basically, you can only go so high with your carbohydrates before it's like, hey, you can't let protein fall too far, because that's one of your, one of your golden rules of fat loss is you don't want protein to be too low, right? Because you need to make sure you maintain your lean body mass. But maybe if you want to explain why fats also need to make sure that they're at a certain level and you don't want those to fall too far either.
Yeah, well, fats to some extent they're responsible for synthesizing certain hormones. So there's also some evidence. Now there can be arguments that it's not fat; it might be total calories, but you need that for testosterone production in males. So you don't want your fats to get too low. But yeah, I would love to do 70% was what I wanted to do when I started putting that to paper. I mean, unless I really tried to avoid protein, that would be the only way I could do it. Again, if I try to keep my fats at about 20%. So if it's 65% carbs, 20% fat, that's 60%. Yeah, and then it's 15% protein. Now, to be fair, I have been on this low. I mean, it's a low protein diet for me. So I want to make sure I'm doing this long enough in a maintenance phase that I'm not losing mass in the study just because I dropped my protein. So I've got to have a long enough of a baseline to prevent that from happening. But if it happens, it's still, I'll provide context, like to say, hey, for the last year I was at, 2 grams per kg or 0.9 grams per pound, and dropping it this much could have been part of the. But if I had to guess what will happen, I won't lose muscle mass because of I'm getting some protein, or I'm getting enough. I'm not optimizing it. And I think I'll lose fat and I'll lose body weight, but we'll see. It'll be public, so I can't hide. I can't hide if the results aren't there.
Well, I would imagine too, the carbohydrates might spare that a little bit too, right? With the protein, just because you are going to be so much, like you're just going to have so many carbs that should help. I feel like spare some of that.
Yeah, that's a great point,
well.
because insulin suppresses muscle protein breakdown, and with all the carbs I'm going to be eating, I bought a big thing of cinnamon toast crunch cereal at Sam's.
Hey, that's awesome. I mean, who wouldn't want to diet on cinnamon toast crunch? That sounds amazing.
But
So
I'm scared about how hungry I'm going to be, because I know that goes through me like nothing. So
yeah,
a little bit of fear of my hunger levels, but oh well.
So for where your calorie, kind of around where your calorie, you said you're around 2,900. I would imagine what you're going to be somewhere in the mid 2000s ish, for the fat loss, maybe a little bit lower than that. What does that look like carbohydrate wise? What are you thinking? Like what would the grams be? Do you have an idea yet, or have you not gone that far yet?
I don't know if I've gotten the grams yet, but and again, I've had a little bit of a conversation with Mike. Just getting his feedback. So I know I want to do an average of a 25% caloric deficit, but I also want to do refeeds on the weekends, because I don't want to diet every weekend. So Monday through Friday, it's going to be pretty low, maybe it'll be a 35% deficit. Weekends back up. I haven't done the math yet on well, actually I have. I just don't remember what the grams would be, but I know to the extent that I realized at first I was like, okay, I want to do 1.6 grams per kg of protein, and there's no way. It did not happen unless I had zero fat. Like it couldn't happen. That's even at 65%. Again, I wanted to do 70. Heck, I think I wanted to do 75, and it was insane, like impossible. So I think right now I think it's at 65%, where I can actually, the foods that I know I'm going to eat, I can do that. Yeah. But that's still enough. I mean, 65%, that's a high carbohydrate diet.
Yeah. I'm thinking you'll still be probably in the 300, 200, 300s at least for carbohydrates, I would say. But
that's probably right. Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
If it's Yeah, yeah, that's true. When you look at it like that, man, that's not a lot of carbs, even in a diet.
Yeah. Yep. But hey, that sounds awesome though. Yeah, no, really looking forward to that too. That would be really cool to see that. What last question on this, how long do you think you will be dieting for that?
Ooh, yeah, so that's something that we have been, and again, this is all you're on the ground floor of
I love
this
it.
as I'm talking about it. We've talked about going to the point until I lose 10 pounds. We've also talked about a time, like, hey, I'm gonna do this for 12 weeks. So I don't know yet. But I also like the idea of losing 10% of my body weight. And by the way, I'm at the heaviest I've ever been. Now I have more muscle than in the like I've been fatter in the past, but in terms of body weight, I'm as heavy as I've ever been. So I'm just trying to think here.
And now with that, you were purposely just like trying to put on some body fat to put on some muscle, or was that just more like you just were kind of, hey, I'm just going to take a little break from tracking and things like that? Or
Yeah, it was not purposeful, and it was more just not tracking. So if I'm not tracking, consciously tracking my macros, my discipline is not good and I gain weight. And in this case, just kept gaining and gaining and gaining. But to be fair, I've done diets in the past, just not at a case study level. So it's my lifestyle is such that I gain weight, I lose it, I gain weight, I
yep,
lose it. And I've done that in the past to generate research ideas. And this time I'm like, heck, why not try to publish this?
yeah,
Um, so yeah, that's where I'm at. So yeah, it was not a purposeful, I want to gain weight. And fortunately, my wife, like I don't like my physique when I'm this heavy. My wife could care less. She's like, I like you a little bigger. Like when I'm real lean, I guess I look a lot smaller. And here's something that's interesting. Let me just think. I've been approximately 30 pounds lighter in the last 18 months. I feel no I feel zero. I don't think I can do as many pull-ups at this weight, but my energy level, my headspace, my mobility, there, I can't tell you if I'm 30 pounds heavier or lighter. I don't feel worse. I don't feel better. Like I know a lot of people, they say, oh, I feel horrible when I gain this weight. I don't feel it. I don't even, in my head, if I didn't know on the scale what I weigh, I wouldn't know by how I feel or how I move.
yeah. That is interesting. I mean, I think there's been a lot of research that's come out about how it's really it just depends on the person in terms of where they're comfortable at in terms of how much body fat. It seems like maybe for you, you might just your body might be a little bit more comfortable, just a little bit on the higher end, I guess potentially, or
Yeah, it could be. Like I
yeah,
said, I know I don't like it because in my case, it's just not tracking. Well, I mean, now I'm tracking because I'm trying to nail in my maintenance calories. But yeah, and again, this is not out of the ordinary where just it's my cycle of life because I like to think if I'm a fat loss researcher, I want to do
be
fat
able to,
loss in my own life.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just in this case, at this point, it's more fat than I've had previously, or
Yeah.
more body weight, I guess would be a better way to say it.
Cool. Well, really looking forward to that. That'll be really cool to hear it. And I think that will be cool because, like you said, just there's a lot of information out there about, you can't lose weight with carbohydrates. And so I think that'll be really cool to kind of put some myths to rest. Or, like you said, maybe you find out that it is tougher than you think. And obviously, that will just be something that we'll use in the future. So, what I wanted to talk about today is one of your studies that you had in your August edition. I thought this was a really cool one to chat with you about because typically when I've had you on here, we've talked about like fat loss, diet breaks. And so this one was more hypertrophy oriented. And so one of the studies that you had in August was, and the question was, should you increase training volume to stimulate muscle hypertrophy? If so, how much? And I think this is a good topic because I feel like this gets asked so much in terms of like, some people are like, you need to do a ton of volume. Some people are lower volume. And so I think this will be a good thing to kind of just kind of talk about this and get in so people have a better idea of what they need to do for this. So I don't know if you want to maybe start out by what were some things you looked at, and then if there's any follow-up questions I have, I will ask those.
Yeah, so this study stuck out. And again, I would say this is the best study ever conducted on resistance training volume. And I'll explain why that's the case. But there's around 30 studies, somewhere in that ballpark, whether it's 25 or 35, of studies that have manipulated resistance training volume with a primary outcome variable of muscle hypertrophy. And in almost every single one of those studies, the researchers gave no, and I'm guilty of this too. So I'm looking in the mirror when I've done at least training studies, but they've given no consideration to the resistance training volume the subjects were doing before the study started. So as an example, if I have, let's just say Samantha. Samantha is currently doing, let's say 30 sets per week for her glutes. Let's just say she's really high volume. And then she's going to go into this glute study that a researcher's doing. And they're going to study high versus low volume glute training in this study. Low volume, they say 10 sets. The high volume is 20 sets. And that's a very typical high-low volume. So for this subject, Samantha, she gets assigned to the high group. She does 20 sets. Is she doing high volume? Not for her. She cut her volume by 33%, and she's in the high volume group. So you're actually studying detraining or a reduction in volume in that subject, and then attributing it to a high volume category. That's a problem. And again, that's how a lot of this research is done. I'm guilty of it too. Not anymore. I will always consider, unless it's a new untrained person, we want to consider what they have been doing. So this study controlled for this. They monitored all of the training volume, resistance training volumes, and they did this with the way that I think is the best way. It's called set volume. It's the easiest way to monitor your resistance training volume. How many sets do you do that are near failure? It's scientifically validated. If you can count, you can use this. It's the best, it's validated and the easiest way to monitor, to do your own programming. And what they did was they said, okay, we know what everybody's been doing. We're going to give an arbitrary amount. We're just going to say, hey, do 22 sets per week for your quads, because this was a quad study. They had them do leg press and leg extension. So it didn't matter what they were doing before. Everybody in the, we'll call it the non-individualized training group, they were all going to do 22 sets per week. And that was split over 2 workouts per week. The other group was the individualized resistance training group, volume group. And they said, based on what you were doing, we're going to have you increase it by 20%. So if you were doing 10, you're now going to do 12 sets per week. If you were doing 20 sets, you're now going to do 24 sets per week. So everybody uniformly got a 20% increase in quadriceps training volume. And what they found at the end of the study, when they compared the non-individualized, let's say the cookie cutter program approach versus the tailored individualized program, the group that they said that where they accounted for what they were previously doing, they gained significantly more muscle mass. And I think it was by MRI, maybe ultrasound, I don't remember exactly, but a validated way to assess this. Now, the other group did gain muscle. It was just on average significantly less. And again, if you look in that issue, some of the subjects were doing like 50% less volume. Some were doing 100% more volume, all in this non-individualized group. So this makes sense. And again, as I have this commitment to help coaches become better coaches, you have to appreciate and consider, what is my client currently doing? And then you start your programming from there. Anything else is cookie cutter, and they're out to make money and not necessarily serve that client the best, in my opinion.
Yeah. And like you said, you just kind of talked about, some of these people that were in the non-individualized approach. I mean, like you said here, you have a picture here on Instagram where it was like one person decreased by 50%, decreased by 30%. Then, like you said, some increase from 16% all the way up to 50%. One increase their training volume, subject 16 by 145%, which is insane. So like you said, that's a big jump, right? Like that person, yeah, I mean, they're just going, I mean, that's an insane amount that they're jumping up by there. And so like you said, it's very important to make sure it's individualized. Now, what did they kind of talk about? Maybe did this study have anything to do with maybe like what typically is the like optimal amount of like training volume per week, or was this more just like, yeah, did they kind of go over that? Like, is there still kind of that like sweet spot there with that as well? Or
Well, I don't know. I don't think they did not attempt to come up with a sweet spot, but what they did, they based the 22 sets, which was the standard non-individualized approach. They took like the average set volume from 10 or 12 other published research studies, and the average set volume was 22 sets per week. And this was in bodybuilders, I believe. So that's where they came up with that. In our space, there are, I don't want to say sweet spots, but there is a kind of a consensus. So 10 sets per week per body part is considered low volume. 10 to 20 is considered moderate volume. And then over 20 is considered high volume. Now, personally, as I'm standardizing my workouts, well, my workouts are always standardized, but as I'm laser focused on getting ready for my weight loss case study, I'm doing 10 sets per body part for all of my body parts. And just how I break that down is chest, back, buys, tries, shoulders, quads, hamstring, glutes. So that's 8 body parts. And I'm doing 10 sets, which most people would say is low, the borderline low to moderate volume. And I'm still in the gym 4 hours per week doing that. So I can't imagine doing 20 sets. But I guess when I was 25, I probably did that when my life revolved around training.
yeah, no, I agree. I find that, doing 20 sets on some body parts, man, that would be a lot of training volume to do. And again, I think it all depends on how your recovery is too. Like I think that's going to play a big role in that too. So you do kind of mention, and I know that this could be something that you want to just keep in the issue, but you did kind of mention in the Instagram post that now just increasing your clients' training volume by 20% is a big mistake. Are you okay with sharing why that is, or would you rather just lead them to the issue?
No, let's talk about that. So what we don't know is, yes, 20 set was better than just throwing out some random number or some arbitrary number. It wasn't random, it was arbitrary. So we know that, but is 20% optimal? Well, we don't know, because we don't know what a 10% volume looks like. We don't know what a 30% increase in volume looks like. We only know that a 20% increase in training volume was better than an arbitrary number of training volume. The problem with 20% is if you actually implement that and you do that every month, every other month, every third month, you're going up 20%. Within a year, your training volume is so high, it becomes impossible to actually complete your training program. So the only way, that's why I think 20%, man, that has got to be at the upper level. So I would never do a 20% increase in volume unless I'm starting at a very low volume to start. Again, for a beginner, they can progress a little bit. So unless you're going to do like, increase it and then drop it back down, and then increase it and drop it back down, a straight 20% increase every month or every other month. Again, if you just do the math, you're quickly up to 60 sets for chest within a short period of time, maybe within a year, maybe 2. So it doesn't, if you extrapolate 20%, it does not work long-term.
Yeah, so basically it's more like a short-term thing, and you don't want to regularly add 20% training volume to your training program, because like you said, at some point you'll just you'll be at a ridiculous amount. Same thing, like you don't just want to keep increasing your calorie deficit, because eventually you'll be at a point where there's no return on that either. So
yes, exactly.
Cool. Was there anything else on that study that you maybe wanted to hit on real quick, or any other like interesting findings with that one?
Trying to think. I'll just talk about Cody McBroom. He was the expert coach that I brought in to talk about that. And I like, he elaborated on his system. So he actually has like a category where he ranks or categorizes his clients. If they've never lifted before, he starts them at this. If they are, if they've been training like 6 months, he'll start them here. And if they've been lifting for like, 1 to 5 years, they're here. And then he has this like very veteran category. Now he's also getting their current training volume, but in his experience, generally he can predict their training volume based on how long they've been training. So he takes those two pieces of information. What are they currently doing? How long have they been doing it? And he allows that to inform his programming for that individualized client. So I again, learning from a true professional in coaching, I'm like, I like that. That's you're getting not only what are they currently doing, but how long have they been doing it, and allowing that to impact his programming over the next 8-week block or 6-month block, however he works with them.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think that's again, that just goes to show, what you're going to get with Body by Science too is, it's going to be, you're going to get, what the research says, but also, how somebody in the fields, especially somebody like Cody, how they go about it too. And again, that's invaluable. So I love that. So let's go over one more study real quick. This was, I think, in the initial one maybe, and it was, is there an ideal protein distribution throughout the day to maximize muscle mass? And I think this is a good one because, I get this question a lot, like, hey, how many times how many protein feedings do I need throughout the day? And, does that matter? And so I think this was a cool study to go over.
Yeah, and if I could plug this one real quick, this one was in the inaugural issue, and I'm giving that one away for free.
Perfect.
So if anybody goes to my website, it's billcampbellphd.com. You sign up for my newsletter, and you can download that issue for free, and that kind of gives you an idea of what to expect.
And real quick too, Bill, I'll make sure I put that in the show notes too, so people will have access to that as well too.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, so this study they compared resistance trained males, and the typical American diet is referred to as a protein skewing diet. And what that means is most Americans have a very low protein breakfast, a moderate lunch, and then a pretty big bolus of protein at dinner. So it skews higher as the day goes on. What they said was, let's have one group of resistance trained males follow this protein skewing, very little protein breakfast, a little bit or more at lunch, and then a lot at dinner. And they said the other group is, we're going to more evenly distribute protein throughout the day. So we're going to make sure that breakfast is moderately high, lunch is moderately high, and then dinner will be high. And we do have some other data at the cellular level, which seems to suggest, or which has suggested, protein should be approximately evenly distributed throughout the day to maximize muscle protein synthesis. What we've been lacking is an actual study in humans that put this to the test over 8, 10, 12 weeks. I think this study was 8 weeks. And what they found was when they had protein equally distributed, or I'm going to say approximately equally distributed. So protein wasn't low at breakfast, it was moderate at lunch, high at dinner. And when it was evenly distributed, approximately evenly distributed, they gained more muscle mass. And they did a statistical technique known as an effect size calculation. And that was considered a large difference between the two groups. So there's the evidence that has now supported the cellular data in humans over time to suggest it's best to have your protein approximately evenly distributed throughout the day if your goal is to maximize muscle mass. Let me just throw one thing in here. So what does this mean for people who like time restricted feeding, intermittent fasting? I think it means two things. And again, I'm defining this because this is me. I don't like eating until 10 o'clock at the earliest, sometimes even noon. And then I'll eat till I go to bed. I don't care about the end of the day, but I'm not hungry in the morning. So I have to do two things. If I'm trying to maximize my muscle mass, I'm going to have to at least get I would say a protein supplement in the morning to mimic this study. Or I just have to appreciate I'm leaving a little bit on the table in terms of maximizing my muscle mass for the benefit of just not eating or not, saving those calories or whatever. And I think in a fat loss phase, that's justifiable. You're sacrificing a little bit of muscle mass, but if you're in a fat loss phase, you prioritize fat loss. So that's kind of what I do. I'm leaving a little bit on the table generally by recognition, by this study's outcome, but that's okay for me.
Yeah, right. And that, like you said, I think it's, just you have to realize that like you make that choice, right? It's like, hey, I'm okay with leaving a little bit on the table for this. And this was 8 to 12 weeks. You said that they did this, so this was spread out over a decent amount. It's not like it was, hey, this was relatively short term, so you could imagine too that was it 8 to 12 weeks?
I think it was 8. I think it was an 8-week study. I
Yeah.
think that's right.
So I mean, I think there too the longer that gets taken out, how much big of a difference is going to have over a year and things like that, and what is kind of the mechanism there at play that, makes it important to make sure that you get that spread out evenly throughout the day versus kind of having it skewed.
Well, I think the biggest variable is the protein feeding will stimulate muscle protein synthesis, which is what everybody focuses on, but it also will help suppress muscle protein breakdown, which is much harder to study. So most studies don't focus on that, which means most people don't appreciate that. So you're getting an anabolic stimulus from the increase in synthesis and the suppression of muscle protein breakdown for another 2, 3, 4 hour period when you maximize or when you have an optimal protein feeding in the morning. And over time, day after day after day, again over 8 weeks, that actually manifests as additional muscle mass.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And now you do kind of mention here too that for you the most important still is total daily protein intake. So like obviously you want to get spread out, but you're still kind of saying that at the end of the day, like you do want to make sure that you at least hit your total amount for the day if all else fails.
Right. Yeah. So if I'm going to prioritize, what's the most important thing for me? If I'm 200 pounds, 200 grams of protein per day, again, trying to maximize muscle mass, if that's the goal, that's the most important thing. Number 2 is, okay, I've got my 200 grams. The next most important decision is let's distribute them approximately equally throughout the day. For me, it would probably be 4 feedings: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then post-workout. Now, you could say, well, this study said that equally distributing them was more important. But if I only have 40 grams of protein in a day and I take 10 for breakfast, 10 for lunch, 10 for dinner, 10 before bed, yeah, you've nailed distribution, but you're nowhere near optimal protein intake. So that's why I layer this. So get your protein, and ideally then get it approximately equal throughout the day. And then even a third layer would be, I would say, get one of those feedings before or after your workout. Now the science there is less convincing. There is some. But the way that I think about that is I'm going to be eating protein anyway 3 or 4 times throughout the day. So why not prioritize one of them around my workout? There's definitely no harm and some limited evidence to suggest that it's helpful.
If somebody, because I could hear somebody, again, you talk about, hey, total protein's the most important. So if somebody were at the end of the day, they were super low, you would just tell them, hey, just eat a little bit extra protein in that meal. Don't stress it. It is off a little bit at that point at night. Say you're, you've been doing about 20, 30 throughout the day, you're 50 grams short of where you want to be. You would just say, hey, at that point, just hit your protein goal of 50 in that meal at night.
Yeah, that would be what I would suggest.
Cool. Because I know some people would probably hear that, freak out, and be like, "Oh, well, so and so says just eat this throughout the day," and then they end up being short on their protein goal for the day. So, cool. And then I guess in terms of how many throughout the day, just again total body weight, and then evenly distribute it. And can you overdo it, like in terms of how many meals you have per day, or what do you typically recommend there?
I think a good general recommendation is 3 to 5 protein feedings per day, and that would be dictated by lifestyle. So what works for you? 5 for me is too many. 4 is probably about my sweet spot, even maybe 3 some days. The problem with high frequency of feedings, there's this concept known as the muscle refractory response. Some call it the protein full, muscle full response. So that would suggest that if your protein feedings are too frequent, you're not getting any type of muscle protein synthetic response. So the theory is you eat protein, which will increase the plasma amino acid response in the blood. So blood amino acids will be higher. They need to go back down to baseline to reset your protein synthetic response. So that can only happen if you're eating fewer protein feedings as opposed to many, many, many. So, and again, the research was like, something obscene, like 10 feet, a pulse of 10 feedings per day through intravenous injection. So in theory, too many will not maximize muscle protein synthesis. Too few will not maximize protein synthesis. So what makes sense? Somewhere in the middle. I say 3 to 5. For me, that's probably 3 or 4.
I agree. I find that 4 is the sweet spot for most people as well. It just seems that's the one that most people can stick with. And, like you said, 5 starts to become a little bit too much. And then 3 solid 2, like, yeah, that's that 3 to 4 mark. Anything under that, it's like you're probably going to be missing out on some muscle growth in the long run. So awesome, Bill. We'll appreciate you sharing these studies. And again, definitely I will link the Body by Science. Is there anywhere else where you would like to lead the audience, or anything else that you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, so if anybody's interested in the Body by Science, go to my website. It's billcampbellphd.com. And again, download the inaugural issue for free. We talk about processed foods and how that can kind of put up hurdles for your fat loss goals if it's extreme. And then we talked about the other study, the protein distribution one. And I'm also active on Instagram. That's Bill Campbell, Ph.D. So if you go there, try to answer any question I get. So if you have questions, I try to answer them.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think in that first issue, you guys went over the Kevin Hall processed food study, correct? Yep. Yeah. And that was one of those probably landmark ones that you were talking about earlier as well. Yeah, that one I feel like is referenced all the time. But Bill, appreciate you for coming on and sharing everything. And we will chat with you next time.
All right. Thank you very much.